yourself is a very hard thing to do. Part 2 is the first edition of this book, originally titled The Process, Art, and Science of Leadership. When I originally wrote it, I had little to no context as to how or why my process worked. Part 1 gives us context. Part 2 gives us the process and wellness practices to move through personal and professional challenges. The context I provide in Part 1, along with the details of the process in Part 2, gives even greater credence to my leadership methodology. This book shows you the importance of becoming an ice-cold leader. Chapter 1. We were sure you were dead. One of the combat areas of proficiency required of a Navy SEAL platoon is military operations in an urban terrain, or MOUT. This is simply the act of a military unit moving through a city and fighting, usually from house to house. This was typically the type of combat you saw on the news during the War on Terror in Iraq. One night, as my platoon was training, we set up on a house for entry, and I was to be the second man through the door. I would simply go the opposite way the number one man went. The number one man's nickname was Booger. No secret meaning here, he always seemed to have a hanger disgustingly in view. In other words, if Booger went through the door and turned right, I would go left. My job was to simply read off him, go the opposite way, and continue on with the standard house clearing protocols. The movement of a proficient military unit making its way through the house are clear and distinct. If a SEAL decides he is going to go to the right, that's it. If it is the wrong move, it will be up to his teammates to make the necessary corrections to ensure a fluid and aggressive flow of movement through the house. This is why I was surprised when Booger started to go left, but then made a sudden jump to the right. It was an unusual display of uncertainty. Despite the speed at which we were moving, I remember clearly thinking to myself, I wonder why I did that. I was about to find out a split second later. As I stepped to the left through the door's threshold and brought my weapon up to clear my area of the room, I suddenly found myself in a free fall. There was no floor as I entered straight through the door. This is what Booger saw and instinctively jumped away from. As an aside, night vision goggles were not in play back then. We had flashlights on our weapons that we would turn on as soon as we passed through the threshold of the door. Hence, I couldn't see that there was no floor on the other side of the door until it was too late. I always felt bad for Booger. Some of the guys gave him a hard time for not warning me. I put a stop to the teasing immediately because it was impossible for Booger to have warned me. We were moving too fast, and I was practically touching him as we went through the door. I distinctly remember time slowing down as I fell and having a couple things go through my mind. "Are you shitting me?" was definitely the first thing. "I wonder how far this fall is going to be," was next. And finally, "I wonder what is going to be on the floor when I eventually hit." I was anticipating broken glass, jagged steel, or something awful waiting to make the fall worse. It turned out to be about a 10-foot fall onto concrete. Not great, but much less bad than I was anticipating. I ended up landing forehead first. The brim of my helmet shot up upon impact, which exposed my forehead and did not protect me at all. I recently reconnected with one of my teammates, and we had a couple of laughs over the incident. In a flash of seriousness, he relayed to me the sentiment of the platoon after the fall. "We were sure you were dead. The sound of your head hitting the ground was nauseating. We couldn't believe it when you got up." For better or worse, things were a little different back then when it came to head injuries, and injuries in general. After everyone had some fun looking at the new gash on my skull, we finished up some additional training before I was taken to the local hospital for stitches. At the hospital, the doctor simply asked what happened and then stitched up my head. We couldn't have been in the hospital for more than an hour. In my medical record, there was a small slip of paper indicating that I was at the hospital. There were no notes from the doctor describing the injury or the treatment. To the best of my recollection, this was at my request. The next day, I was back at training as if nothing happened. As far as I was concerned, the problem was not my head injury, it was my wrist. After we got back from the hospital, I went to our platoon corpsman's room and told him my wrists were in terrible pain. One light touch of his finger to both wrists gave him all the information he needed.